Hi, and welcome to Getting Biblical, the show where I drink too much and talk about my favorite Bible stories. I am Matt Smith, your host, and thank you for joining us today. So today's episode, I want to go a little bit outside the norm. I know I've been doing that a lot lately. We did a Halloween episode. I talked about Stan Lee, and now here we are, kind of again going a little bit outside the normal, just the straight up Bible stories that we normally do. But I wanted to do a themed episode for the upcoming, amazing holiday, one of my favorites, probably my second favorite of the year. Of course, I'm talking about Thanksgiving, right? It's right around the corner, just a few days away from here. And as much as I love it and love the mashed potatoes and the gravy and the turkey and all that, I have this theory about Thanksgiving and its origins, its true origins, and what was actually the intention of that. A bit of a Bible theory, or maybe you should call it an American history theory. I'm not sure. So follow along. You can see if you like to link up the dots like I have. But I believe that Thanksgiving, the very first Thanksgiving, the first one that was done, it was actually rooted in Judaism, in a Jewish holiday. I'm not the only one that thinks this. I'm not absolutely a crackpot, but I'll give you my evidence for why I think this later on in the episode. But this is the Getting Biblical Thanksgiving episode. And again, thank you guys for joining us today. So, and always, we're supposed to be starting with, what I'm drinking today. That's how the show goes. I'm switching it up a little bit. This is actually, I'm as of the time of this recording, I'm actually doing some batch episodes. I'm getting ready to go out of town for my sister's birthday and things. So I'm trying to load the pipeline with some content. So this is actually the second episode that I've done tonight. I don't really have a thing that I've been drinking to talk about per se. I have been drinking, had some wine with dinner, and then had some whiskey in the last episode that I just recorded. So I'm doing okay. I don't want you to think that I'm slacking in that department. But I'm switching it up a bit. I was at the store today just getting some stuff, and I stumbled upon a new release by Haagen-Dazs. And if you saw my Instagram, you already know where I'm going with this. But Haagen-Dazs has released a new flavor, a new kind of line of their ice cream, and it's their spirits line. They've got one that has like rum in it, and one that has, I think it was like a stout beer, and it was like an Irish like cream or something. And of course, I grabbed the one that had the word bourbon on it. It's officially the Bourbon Vanilla Bean Truffle Ice Cream. That's the official name of it. And went ahead and grabbed it, of course, right? I see the word bourbon on something, I automatically buy it generally. The packaging says it's less than 0.5% alcohol in the product. But I gotta tell you, it was pretty great. I actually had some of that before I started drinking or anything, and you could taste it. You could taste the bourbon flavor in there. So they did a really great job. I would highly recommend it. It's probably the second best boozy ice cream that I've ever had. The first was when I was in Scotland, actually, earlier in January this year. I did a big group tour to Loch Ness, and on the return back from Loch Ness, we stopped for kind of like a bathroom break type thing. It was planned, of course, part of the tour. But we in this little Scottish town called, I hope I get it right, Pitlochry, I believe is what it's called, Pitlochry. And they have a little ice cream shop. I had made friends with the tour guide, with the bus driver. I think he was my favorite of all the guests that were on the bus, if I'm being honest. And he made sure to let me know while we were on break from the tour to use the restrooms and stuff like that. He's like, hey, there's this ice cream shop over here that actually has a relationship with the local distillery here in Pitlochry. The distillery is called Edredor. I'm pretty sure I'm not saying that right, but there's a small distillery there, and they actually give them scotch to put into their ice cream. And so in like 20 degree Highlands kind of area of Scotland, and I'm a Florida boy, so I was all bundled up and cold, but I went but nevertheless I went and got myself a ice cream cone of their Scotch whiskey ice cream, and that was amazing. I actually had to get carded for that because it was enough booze in that you really shouldn't eat it and then drive. So that's like number one ranking in my mind of booze and ice cream together. But if you aren't near the Highlands of Scotland, if you're on your way back from Loch Ness and you just want to go to your local supermarket here in the United States, then you should check it out. Check out the Haagen-Dazs Spirit line. I haven't tried the other ones yet. I want to go back for the stout beer one because that interests me. And rum, I'm sure it's good. I want to try it. I mean, we've had rum raisin for years, right? That's the thing. So I'm wondering. I didn't even look at the packaging if it's raisin or not. Probably not. That would be too on the nose, I think. But I'll have to go look and look at those. I stopped at Bourbon and let me just try this. But that's yeah, it was good, man. 10 out of 10. I'd like to do, normally this is the part of the show where I like open the cork bottle of what I'm drinking and pour myself a glass and let you hear all the sound effects. And there's not really a lot of sound effects to listening to me lick a spoon of ice cream right out of the little carton. So we'll forego all that for y'all's sake. But that's what we're eating tonight on this Thanksgiving episode. So if you have to bring a dessert for your Thanksgiving get together, you should check it out. Definitely recommended. All right, so before we get going on the actual Thanksgiving stuff, I want to take a second and lay a little bit of foundation, a little bit of some stuff in case you didn't know. For those that don't know, I passed over, no pun intended, Jewish holidays. I skipped over talking about a holiday that just came by, and it's called Sukkot. Our Feast of Tabernacles. It's a biblically commanded holiday with directions and mentions of it found throughout the Old Testament, and even references to it being observed in Jesus' time and all that, right? It's a bigger holiday. It's a week-long celebration or festival or whatever. It happens right after Yom Kippur, and it's a remembrance of the 40 years that the Israelites were in the desert. They're wandering. And, if Passover is remembering the escape, Sukkot is remembering the 40 years wandering. It's kind of how it goes. It's probably one of the most interestingly observed holidays because unlike other holidays like Passover and stuff, like Passover you read the Haggadah and you eat some matzah or whatever, and then like Yom Kippur is a fast day, all that. Sukkot is so left field as far as how you celebrate it. It's the Jewish holiday of camping, to put it lightly. To remember the 40 years of wandering that the Israelites did, it's customary during Sukkot to build what they call a booth or a sukkah. It's usually 3 walls, and the fourth place where the wall would be is opened up or whatever. So it's just a 3 kind of walled building usually, small, not super big. And it's a booth. It's like at a carnival or something, maybe. I don't know, that type of. So you can imagine it. And it's opened up, and you put palm fronds or whatever on the top to make a little roof and everything. And you're kind of supposed to sleep out there in that, for a week to help remember what the Israelites went through for 40 years. Things have gotten lost a little bit in modern day, and not a lot of people actually do that anymore. Some do, and kudos to them. I think it's boiled down to at least have a meal. Go out there, have a meal outdoors in the sukkah, and that once a day, go have a meal out there, and that'll meet the requirement. I think it's kind of what it's boiled down to in modern times for most people that are still heavily observant. Anyway, so that's sukkah. Also in another interesting side bonus thing, in Bible times it was customary not to just do this out in your front yard or whatever, but it was customary for the men to go to Jerusalem to celebrate it there, to do their Jewish camping trip there. And that's why there's a number of people, myself included, I guess, that believe that in the New Testament, when it talks about Jesus being born, and they had to go to, because there was a census going on, and so Joseph and Mary had to go to Jerusalem to do all that, and there was no room at the inn, all that kind of stuff. It's because the town was flooded with everyone coming in because the the decision to do the census wasn't just some random thing that he was like, oh, like we should count all the people and see how many people are all around, the kingdom, as far as it stretches. Let's make them all come here and do a big census. No, it was Sukkot, and they had to go to Jerusalem anyway to do the camping thing or whatever, to go celebrate Sukkot. So while they were there, they also did a census, I think is what most people agree is probably what happened. And so then they were there, but the city was just packed, to the brim. And that's when, they had to give birth in a manger because there was no other room for them anywhere else. So that's kind of a little bit of also a fun backstory for Sukkot. And anyway, so now you know that. That's I didn't really go into it. I didn't do an episode about it. Maybe we will next year. We'll see. But we just wanted to lay that groundwork and let you guys know that I skipped over a holiday that happened recently. All right, so let's get back to Thanksgiving, and it's hard to even know where to start exactly with the whole Thanksgiving thing. So there's a lot of kind of confusing players. So there's been a lot of obviously and rightfully so pointing fingers and whatever of the really shitty stuff that white people did to the Native Americans, smallpox blankets and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes Thanksgiving, gets wrapped up in all of that. And I don't know, I wasn't there, not sure exactly. But there's a lot of different players and different groups of people that were coming over to the quote-unquote New World at that time. And so we're going to do a little bit of a history lesson and go into who those were and what their motives were and what I think and how I think it all connects together. So we got to make the clear distinction. So there's a couple, because there's Pilgrims, there's Puritans, Protestants, Plymouth Rock. That's just the P words, right? That's just the one letter of the alphabet. So we got to juggle all that and figure that out to understand where I'm coming from. Okay, all right, going down another rabbit trail. Have you seen the movie Mary, Queen of Scots? It came out earlier this year, 2019. Mary, Queen of Scots. Not a super great movie. Definitely one that I think flew under the radar and no one gave a shit about too much, unfortunately. It's got Margot Robbie as Queen Elizabeth in her hands down ugliest role ever. Like Margot Robbie is so fine, right? She is so hot. Wolf of Wall Street, like Harley Quinn. If you like that sort of thing, I'm not super into that version of her. But as Queen Elizabeth, not so much. Definitely ugh. Kind of hard to look at. She had some disease things going on with her face later on, if you don't know the story of Queen Elizabeth all the way through. But so Margot Robbie. It's got David Tennant, the Doctor, the 10th Doctor, as the leader of the Scottish Protestant movement, the Scottish Reformation. He's a major dick in the movie. Definitely, hands down, the number one role I've ever seen David Tennant in. And I love David Tennant. Number one role I've ever seen him. I did not like him. I was like, wow, what an asshole. So he played the part perfectly, I guess, for what he was supposed to be doing. Some big names for this movie. But I don't think anyone's ever really seen it. I happen to. It's all apropos, I guess. It all comes together. When I was in the UK, right. It was actually after my Loch Ness trip there in Scotland. I was in London and had a free night with nothing planned. I was like, hey, let me go see this movie that just came out, and I'm over here, and seems very the perfect thing to do on this Wednesday night or whatever it was. So I saw the movie in a London theater, and really was able to absorb it in after touring, UK in general, and help kind of put things together, and being the museums and stuff, and putting it all together. So the movie had an impact on me just because I was kind of living the scenery there a bit. But there's so much history there. There's a lot there. Just England and Scotland and Catholicism and Protestants and everything. There was a lot of killing and murdering of people over splitting hairs between Catholicism and Protestants, which I just don't get. I don't understand it. I realize it's politics actually more than religion and all that kind of bullshit, but like even the line between like Judaism and Christians is like seems bigger, right? There's like a whole like half the book, half the Bible that that one of them doesn't really look at and the other does. Believing in Jesus versus not, that type of thing, right? So that seems like a bigger thing that you could have some arguments about, right? And but Catholicism versus Protestants, like you're looking at the same book, you're looking at the same half. You're still doing the Jesus stuff, but man, they killed a lot of people. There's a lot of stuff going on, dude. Obviously it's oversimplifying a lot of the things, but pretty wild. And this movie, I think, puts that into perspective a decent bit from what I know about the subject. Some yank, some American dude trying to put things together from Wikipedia and articles he's read and try to figure it all out. But so you've got Mary, Queen of Scots, and then Queen Elizabeth. So Mary, she was Catholic, has a rightful claim to the throne of England. But Elizabeth, who's Protestant, does not want to give up her throne, her power. She's in control right now, doesn't want to acknowledge that Mary is in line and has access to it. So they go back and forth and all this kind of stuff and kind of fighting over it and they're because they're cousins. They're cousins actually. They know each other, so they're not like just strangers or whatever. So they have like a little bit of familiarity and bond, but there's a power struggle. And no spoilers, and I don't know what the statute of limitations of spoilers are of things that happened in the 16th century. But end result, end thing, like even like this is like the post-credit scene of the movie or whatever. Mary, Queen of Scots, her son is finally made the first unifying king over the United Kingdom, right? In Scotland, he was the King of Scotland. He was known as James the Sixth. He was the sixth James in a row or whatever, I guess, the lineage to be King of Scotland. But then when they unified and he became the King of England also, and Ireland and everything, he was James the First, right? So they rolled back the numbers on him. But that is the guy, he commissioned the King James Bible, which you may have heard of. That's him. We're talking about that King James, the daughter, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. So a lot going on with this dude and at that time frame. And then so now King James, despite his mother Mary baptizing him as Catholic, he went on to be a Protestant. He still liked the formation of the church and its systems to an extent. So now James, despite his mother Mary, right, baptizing him as Catholic as a baby, he grew up to become Protestant. But he still liked the formation of the church and its systems and all that to kind of an extent. But then you have these two other groups. And a lot of people get confused by the history of it all. But I'm going to boil it down in, like Puritans and then Pilgrims. The Puritans were a group of people that had risen up in England under Queen Elizabeth, Margot Robbie. It was a rather large group of people with a public voice. So imagine like Catholicism and the fans of Catholicism. That's one group, like team that. And then you've got King James and the official Church of England. And the Puritans, who had a lot of ties with the Church of England. So the Puritans were a group of people that had risen up in England under Queen Elizabeth, Margot Robbie, right? It was a rather large group of people with a public voice. It wasn't just like a grassroots underground movement. They were a union type of thing. They were a group. So you got on one side you've got Catholicism and the fans of Catholicism, and then you've got King James and the official Church of England. And then the Puritans, who had a lot of ties with the Church of England, right? They were in that camp, basically, but they didn't like all of their ideas and the official rules. Like, for instance, Sunday mornings were supposed to be considered a special time for church services, and Sunday afternoons were specifically reserved for sports. Not unlike nowadays, I suppose, actually. 16th century, 17th century, similar in that regards. Church of the morning, sports afterwards. And the Puritans came out and very vocally, very loudly, again, like that, like a union, came out and like, hey, Sunday is for the Lord, that's for Jesus, and per the fourth commandment of the 10, you shouldn't do any work on the Sabbath day. Very much like the Jewish religion observes the Sabbath. The Puritans and the whatever, Protestants and as a whole, whatever, the whole group choose the Sabbath to mean Sunday instead of Saturday, but whatever. Their hearts were kind of in the right place. But they came out and like, hey, we need to stop doing sports shit on the Lord's Day, on Sunday. And they went to King James and fussed about it and complained. So King James like went to studying and thinking about stuff, and he came out and he creates a law. And he releases the Book of Sports. Not a sports book, which is a very different thing, I'm pretty certain. But that was like what Marty McFly was looking for, or was that just a sports almanac? Anyway, sports book, is that gambling? I don't know. Anyway, but the Book of Sports, this was in 1617. It's what it calls it. And it listed out, and by his decree, what sports people were permitted to play on Sunday after church that wouldn't like cross the line into being like too much physical exertion and too much like work, right? Like how do we straddle this line as much as we can? And they didn't want anything too rough on Sunday, which I think, what was his I think the list that was like permittable quote unquote sports things to do on Sunday, on the Lord's Day. You could dance and leaping. I don't know if that means pole vaulting or just like jumping in the air gleefully. I don't know. But it just says leaping and archery. Weirdly enough, archery was deemed okay and fit for the Lord's Day and wasn't too physically exhausting apparently to break that commandment. So he comes out with this whole list of things that you can and can't do on Sunday. But what was so that's the stuff that's okay. The stuff that's not okay, and here's where it gets a little fucked up, was something that they did called bull baiting, which I looked into, and I assumed at first it meant like bull fighting, right? There's a bull out there, you got a matador, red cape or whatever, red sheet thing, whatever, and no, none of that. That's not what I was talking about. Bull baiting was a big sport. It's like they take a bull and they would make the bull fight other animals, most specifically dogs. They would train up dogs, so like dog fighting, but not where it's like one-on-one dogs. It's one bull versus like a pack of dogs that are trained to take down bulls. That's like literally like why the English bulldog breed became a breed. That's where it comes from, apparently. So they would train these dogs to fight the bulls, and then they would blow pepper into the bull's nose to rile it up and get it all mad and everything, just like a Looney Tunes, cartoon. And then they let the animals fight, and they would watch it, and that was sport, which is horrible. Apparently, there's another version of it also, if they were able to obtain one, called bear baiting, which, as you can imagine, it's in the name, same thing, but it's bear versus dogs rather than bull versus dogs. And it's a wild. I mean, it's animal cruelty. It's fucked up. I don't understand. Queen Elizabeth, though, Margot Robbie, she was a big fan of this sport, evidently. And when it came under fire, when people in the 16th century started getting woke a little bit, and like, hey, this is not really cool. This is animal cruelty. She actually came out. She kind of overruled Parliament. I read one thing saying, and she was like, "Nah, we're not gonna outlaw it. People come together like we should ban this sport. This is not okay." And she's like, "No, I really like it. I'm really into it. It stays. It's legal." So anyway, that was Queen Elizabeth for you. So where was I? So King James, he comes out with this book of sports saying that you can do archery and dancing and leaping and things, but no like bear fights, that type of thing. Also bowling. Did I mention bowling? Bowling was outlawed on Sundays. I don't know why. It seems like if you can do archery without breaking a sweat, you should be able to do bowling easier. I don't know if bowling was harder back then or not. Maybe maybe there was bears involved in that too. I don't even know. I'm not a king. I don't know what was happening. But that's just an example of what King James and the Church of England were putting into place as some of their, I don't say arbitrary, but like, hey, we're going to try to take the rules of the Bible and what it says and then apply them to modern day and then make them laws and everybody has to follow them and Church of England shit. So forcibly making everyone follow their interpretation of what the Bible says. So there's another group even more severe. So the who was that? I talked about the Puritans. So the Puritans came out and were like, hey, we don't think we should do these like extraneous sports on Sunday because that's the Lord's Day, and we really need to get back to like Bible roots and just do like really try to follow the Bible. There was another group called the separatists, who later history will call the Pilgrims, and being a separatist was actually illegal. There wasn't a huge number of them. They were a little too extreme on their whereas the Puritans had a lot of kind of like some power in the voice and whatever. They're like, hey, we need to we think we should do it this way or whatever. The Pilgrims or the separatists were more extreme and we need to just scratch everything, all the rules that you're making and whatever, and let's go let's go follow the Bible literally and just do it like that. The Puritists thought the Puritans believed that they could achieve their goal of following the Bible better by keeping the system the way that it was and just being smart and trying to look at everything a little bit closer and do a better job. The separatists were like, nah, it's all fucked up. We're gonna separate from the church itself. And that church was the Church of England and politics and things, and that's not allowed. So, because there was a lot of other things. It wasn't just like the Book of Sports or whatever, but it had just gotten so big. There was so much other stuff, just kind of like Catholicism. There's a lot of Catholic things that they do, like Mass and whatever and stuff, that aren't in the Bible. They've added other stuff that, and I'm not here to say yay or nay or whatever. That you do you, whatever. I don't care. But it's not, a lot of that stuff's not literal. Confessions and stuff or confessionals, but whatever they call them. I don't know. Like a lot of the stuff in Catholicism and then the stuff in the Church of England was like extra added on traditions and things and way we do stuff that wasn't actually biblical. The separatists were like, fuck it. We want to go straight biblical. If it's not in the Bible, we ain't doing it. And that's who they were. They were generally, so the separatists, they were generally kind of lower income and not super well educated usually. A bunch of them got fed up with the church and everything altogether. And because it was kind of illegal, they left, a lot of them left England and they went to Holland in search of religious freedoms. And I don't know if you know this, but there was a bunch of other people that were hanging out in Holland also looking for religious freedoms about that time, the Jews. Evidently, Holland or the Netherlands or whatever we're calling it, sort of kind of created as a whole place for religious freedoms and just come do you. And the Jews who were being persecuted around the world at that time kept running up against governments and groups that wanted them to become Catholic or Protestant or whatever, to convert to whatever the religion of the land was, and they didn't want that. So evidently there seemed to be pretty prominent in Holland for a decent while, and until Hitler and the Nazis came in, and 85% of them all stopped being there, killed or removed or whatever. That's why there's not a big, I guess, population there that we think of. Jews in the Netherlands isn't a big thing that I think of, at least. But that's because of Hitler. But for a while, evidently, stuff I was looking up online said that there was. So here's where it comes into play. Here's where my theory comes in to build the case. So the separatists, right, didn't have a lot of political connections or investment in the Church of England or in that jazz. They wanted to simplify things and get back to Bible basics. They wanted to read the Bible and just do what God wants. That's the religious freedoms they were looking for. So they leave England and they go to Holland for that freedom. And in Holland, they meet and live with the Jews that are in Holland, trying to do the same thing. And they're like, hey, yeah, we want to know more about the Bible, and let's compare notes because we're here for similar reasons. And they do, and they hang out, and they share knowledge and stuff, and they learn about Jewish beliefs and customs. This is not necessarily 100% true. Well, right. That's how I'm imagining it's going down. And they're partaking and they're sharing of ideas and feasts and Passover and Feast of Tabernacles and Sukkot, whatever, Harvest Festival, all that. That's the thing where you camp outside for a week in gratitude and remembrance of living in the desert after leaving Egypt and God providing and all that thing. So they're there and they're learning. Then they leave Holland and their Jewish friends that were there, and they get a chance to go to America. A small group still. Only 102 of them came over on that first ship to land at Plymouth Rock in 1620 or whatever. So about half of them even died that first winter over there. Like, it's very small numbers of the separatists, the pilgrims. But they still, so they're there, and their numbers are dwindling. 102 originally, then cut in half by the first winter. But they want to worship, God and do their best. Like they were trying, and they had made friends with the local Indians and whatever, Native Americans, whatever. And then came that first year's harvest, and they're like, hey, you know what? We're super thankful that we survived. The half of us, very very Thanos, very half of them passed. But they're very thankful that they're there, and they've got steady food to eat and whatever. The Indians are evidently, if my first grade history book was correct, they taught them how to put the fish underneath the corn so it would help grow and all that kind of shit. So they just like, hey, let's try out that Sukkot thing that those Netherlands Jews were telling us about. So they had a feast and kind of, I think, attempted the week-long feast of Sukkot. And the Indians were there, and they just had a big meal, and they were hanging out. And then that was the first Thanksgiving, as they say it. And there's no record of them actually calling it Thanksgiving back then. Right? That's a term that we've added to it now. It was just a feast. It was just the harvest has come in. Let's have a big meal. Some reports say it was for several days. There's a few reports that even indicate that it might have been up to a week. So it was a big deal. It wasn't just one afternoon before, the football game comes on or whatever type thing. It was apparently a pretty big deal. I don't think they gave away any smallpox blankets here. If they did, it was probably an accident. I don't think these guys were those guys that were doing all that stuff. There's only 50 of them, right? They were just there to try to do their best. It was the Puritans. The Puritans were the ones that did all the other bullshit. They're the ones that came over 10 years later. And here's the rough timeline. In 1607, the Virginia Company brought over 100 English guys or whatever on behalf of Queen Elizabeth and Margaret Robbie to set up Jamestown. And I know I'm bouncing around a little bit. I was some of the stuff that there's an inconsistency here, right? Some of the stuff that I was talking about, like the Book of Sports with King James, happened after this would have happened, I guess. So it's not that was just an example of some of the things that the Church of England and everything that was going on, how people didn't like how they were being religiously oppressed or whatever. So don't, I don't know, whatever, just disclaimer, I guess. That was just an example of a thing that was happening, kind of. But no, so Queen Elizabeth, Margaret Robbie, she sends over these guys over to Jamestown there to set up Jamestown, but they were there for profit, not religious freedoms, right? That led to Pocahontas and James Smith and all that stuff that was happening. That was Jamestown, Virginia. So that was 1607. That was the first, Queen Elizabeth sending people over there to try to make profit off the New World. 1620 was when the separatists, the guys I just got done talking about, the big, the pilgrims, they caught wind of America in a place that they could practice religious freedoms, whatever thing, came over, and evidently were not, they weren't fighting with the Indians, they weren't having issues. That was in Plymouth, later Massachusetts, and that was where the first quote unquote Thanksgiving, thanks Abraham Lincoln for the name. But the that was the different groups, right? 1607, Virginia Company there to set up Jamestown and make money. 1620, the separatists there for religious freedoms, and that's where Thanksgiving comes from. Then 10 years later after that, I believe it was, the Puritans started catching wind of what was happening with America and what the separatists had done, and they were even more fed up with the Church of England and wanted to come over here and start a new England, whatever. And so they come over in like 1629, and they start doing the super like colonization of America. That's when things really started happening. And then by the 1700s, they started bringing over African slaves and that horrible bullshit mess. So the Puritans, I don't know, they might have been kind of dicks themselves. Maybe they were like half religious freedoms, half just money in the New World type thing. But definitely not saying that white people didn't do some fucked up shit to the Native Americans, starting in 1607 with the Virginia Company and everything. I get that, right? Yeah. So I think that the separatists, the Pilgrims, not the Puritans, the Pilgrims that came over and had that first quote unquote Thanksgiving meal, they were probably decent guys. I think. I'm hoping, and that's I think that they were trying to mimic Sukkot, this holiday. So, if you compare them to, like, Sukkot and Thanksgiving, they're both in the fall. The first Thanksgiving was actually probably in October, not late November, records would indicate. And then Sukkot is traditionally done in September or October. They're both harvest festivals. Both are to give thanks to God for things. Sukkot is 7 day long. It's a week-long thing. The first Thanksgiving, like I mentioned, allegedly, some reports say it lasted for 3 days. Some say it lasted for 7 days. You can look at different things out there that indicates, the records and stuff that they had. So that's my theory. That's my Bible theory of how Thanksgiving was a poor man's Jewish holiday. that's my thing. That's what I think. So. Anyway, just throwing that out there. You can take it or leave it. Do what you want. I don't care. Just have fun. Enjoy your family. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Cheers.